April was a really interesting month. I feel like I was reading all sorts of genres. This is the first book that I've actually ever rated 1 star. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Rochelle for those of you that are new here. I read a lot of different books and I also have a disability. And today what we're gonna do is wrap up the 8 books that I read for the month of April. Now, April was a very interesting reading month for me. I feel like I read a lot of really great books and then I read a lot of not so great books, especially towards the end of the month. That put me in a little bit of a reading slump. So let's go and look through some of the stats and then also look through, of course, all the books that I read. So for April, I, of course, read 8 books. So that's around 3,313 pages. I love seeing how many pages I read at the end of the month. It's just, there's something so satisfying about it. And I'm not a numbers gal. Like, I didn't do well in college algebra, but something about seeing numbers when it comes to how many books I read and how much I was successfully able to finish just scratches an itch, and I love it. And of course, the genre that I read the most of was horror. I love my horror books, what can I say? And then average rating was 3.56. So let's go and get a better look at some of those books. So with all of my reading wrap-ups, I tend to now go from lowest to highest. I've heard that that's kind of the way that people like to look at it the most. So that's kind of what I've been doing, and I do really like the way it feels. It just kind of flows a little bit more naturally. So for the lowest rating, and I think this is the first book that I've actually ever rated 1 star. I've usually always DNF'd books, but this one I actually finished, and it's my first 1 star ever. So this is their Monstrous Hearts by Yigit, Turhan. And I listened to this one as an audiobook. I was so disappointed with this book. I truly thought that I would love it so much. However, I was so annoyed with it. So with this book, we're basically following our main character, who's a bit of, I wouldn't say a bit of a failure, but he is an author and he's just not striking any sort of inspiration, and so he's struggling to go and write his next book. Well, while he's kind of dealing with that, he learns that his grandmother has passed away and has left a lot to him. So he needs to go and fly out to where his grandmother lived, attend the funeral, and then kind of look through all of her stuff. And while there, he ends up going and finding a book that was left behind by his grandma, and he becomes immersed in the story that she has written. And then on the opposite end, we are getting the grandmother's point of view, Perry Han, and learning about things from her side and basically her entire life story. And I really loved the narrators themselves. They did a great job pronouncing and speaking. However, I don't know if it was just the way the pace was for Perry Han. That character annoyed me so much, and I found myself constantly rolling my eyes whenever it was her portion of the book. I just couldn't find myself liking either of the main characters, and it probably wasn't until the last 10% of the story that it got interesting, but at that point I was already just trying to zoom through the book as quick as possible so I could finish it. This book might be a loved one for other people, however, it just was not for me. It was so slow, and like I said, the characters just annoyed the heck out of me. Then I have Love and Other Words by Christina Lauren for 3 stars. I know so many people loved this book, so I had really high expectations for it. I ended up picking this book out because of my Defend the TBR game, and I had landed on Love It or Lose It, and I will have a video where I'll go and talk more in depth on my thoughts with this book, but there was something that happened towards the end that frustrated me so much and was kind of brushed over. And it wasn't until I looked at reviews on Goodreads and I saw other people were kind of feeling the same way as me that I felt really validated with some of my frustrations. I did like the 2 main characters to a certain extent because Macy, she basically just lost her mother, and her dad and her are trying to pick up the pieces. They're kind of following a list of rules that she left to them after she passed away. And one of the rules was basically to kind of have like this vacation home where they could escape to. And so her dad has been diligently following every single rule on the list. And so they go and get this little vacation home. And while Macy is going and touring through it, she ends up going to the closet and realizes there's a boy in there. And the boy is reading a book. His name is Elliot, and Macy and Elliot kind of strike up this friendship that basically for Macy means that this guy is her entire world. He's her everything. She's someone she can go and confide in. And of course, with a lot of these romance stories, they soon become best friends, but develop some feelings for each other. This was kind of a coming of age book, learning about yourself and dealing with grief as well as first time love. And it was cute. It was cute, don't get me wrong. There were some pieces that did frustrate me, such as Elliot, how he went and talked and the questions he asked of Macy when they were at their age around, I think, 12 or 13. There just wasn't some tact there. He was just way too blunt, and harsh almost seems too extreme, but it just didn't feel natural and almost too mature. I don't know. There was something that rubbed me wrong about Elliot at that age, and it wasn't until much later that I ended up going and liking this character. And like I said, I'll have more in-depth thoughts of it in my Love It or Lose It video that I will have out, hopefully sometime in the month of May. But yeah, this book just didn't do it for me and caused more frustrations than feelings of love. So I'm so sorry if that hurts anyone, because I know a lot of people really talked about how much they loved this book, but it didn't do it for me. Then I have Deathless Divide by Justina, Ireland. This is the second book to Dread Nation. I wasn't able to finish it at the end of March, and so I finished reading it in April, and I love zombies. I absolutely love zombies, and I was so excited to continue the series because the first book was so good. However, this one just didn't do it as much for me. I felt like there were less zombies and more, I guess, like more historical pieces in a way. I don't want to go too in-depth with this book because it is the second book in a series, and I don't want to give any spoilers. I just was left feeling a little bit disappointed with this book, and I think that's why it took me so long to read it. It just didn't have the same feel and draw as Dread Nation did for me, and so I was a little bit disappointed with this one, which is why I rated it 3.5 stars. Veil of Death and Shadow by Gray Holborn, and I got this one through NerdFam. So with this one, our main character is on her way to meet up with her best friend. She's kind of dealt with this thing where she can kind of feel whenever someone is about to die, and gets the vibe that death is around. So it kind of gave me a little bit of Belladonna vibes. But while she's on the way to go and meet up with her friend, she kind of takes this little detour because she sees someone she vaguely recognizes. So while she's on the way to go and catch that person, she sees a dead crow and decides, like, I'm gonna bury it. And while that happens, she suddenly faints. And the next thing she knows, a few days have passed, she goes looking for her friend, and apparently, like, this apocalyptic event happened. This book was really interesting. It was very spicy. It was kind of a why choose forbidden romance. Also had past and present timelines. So we get a few flashbacks in before this apocalyptic event happened and then time in the future. There also were quite a few spicy scenes in this book, but surprisingly, I did enjoy it. We know that I'm not usually someone that enjoys a lot of spice in my books. However, April was a really interesting month. I feel like I was reading all sorts of genres, and I did really like this one. Apparently, there's kind of like a prequel series that you could choose to read along with the book, or it doesn't matter if you read it or if you don't read it, but after reading this book, I am kind of intrigued to know more about the story, especially how they ended things. I'm not a why choose girl, but at the same time, I did like some of the characters that were mentioned in the story, so I definitely want to know what happens next. And so for this one, I rated it 3.75 stars. Then I read The Buffalo Hunter Hunter by Stephen Graham Jones. I've heard so many good things about this author, and so I decided to go and pick it up. I haven't read a lot of books by Indigenous authors. I've been really wanting to diversify my bookshelf, so I decided to pick this book up, and I did rate it 4.25 stars. I listened to it as an audiobook, and it definitely was a very difficult story to listen to. I would highly recommend going and checking your triggers on this book because there was animal death and also a lot of blood and gore scenes. They were a little bit more descriptive as well. So if that's not your vibe, I would definitely go and check your trigger warnings before checking out that book. But it was really interesting. I really loved the historical aspects of it, and I really liked listening to the book from the 3 different point of views that we were given. It was such an interesting book, but very dark and very difficult to deal with. It was something that was very out of my comfort zone to read, but I'm very glad that I did. And I do want to try to read more books by this author because I've heard nothing but good things about his work. Bat Eater and Other Names for Cora Zeng by Kylie Lee Baker. I rated this one 4.25 stars as well, and I did listen to it as an audiobook. With this one, I feel like I missed a lot of the content because I listened to it instead of actually going and reading it instead. I had the option for 2 different arcs for it. I had a digital arc as well as an audio arc. I wanted to get to the book a little bit sooner than I thought was possible, and I felt like going and listening to it as an audiobook would be a lot more manageable for me. And with this book, we basically follow our main character during the time of COVID. She is Asian, and so we're seeing a lot of different aspects of the racism that was present during COVID. I know some people don't really like reading books that are set in that time because for a lot of us, we lived through the pandemic. We had our various experiences, and I know a lot of people have a difficult time reliving and putting themselves back in that time. I think this is the first book that I actually read where it was set in that timeline instead of a book that was like written and set in that timeline. So it was a very interesting story, very, very dark. Our main character, she kind of cleans up crime scenes, and while she's cleaning up these crime scenes, she's starting to notice that there's a very significant trend with a lot of the victims. And so while going and researching that stuff, she's also dealing with a few other things such as OCD. She's a bit of a germaphobe and a hypochondriac. So it really was a very interesting story, and there were a lot of themes that I thought really added to the story itself. I do wish that I would have read it instead of listening to it because I feel like so much was lost on me, but it was a very interesting story, and I definitely want to check out more by that author as well. Then I have Hidden Pictures by Jason Rekulak, and I rated this one 4.25 stars. I know so many people said that this book was a miss for them. There are so many mixed reviews, and I know a lot of my booktube friends didn't really like this book. However, I absolutely loved this book. I thought it was so interesting. I loved the incorporation of the images added throughout the book. I was thoroughly creeped out in the beginning portion of the book before things started getting a little bit more figured out. And with this one, I truly questioned my own sanity because I chose to read this before I went to bed. So for the first couple of nights, I was a little bit like, oh, it's really creepy going to go to the bathroom. It's so dark. Like, I was a little bit freaked out and in my head. This book honestly would have been 5 stars for me if the paranormal portions were a little bit creepier and the end of the book wasn't as rushed. But also let me describe this book a little bit for you. So our main character, Mallory, she is sober. She was a drug addict because of some very traumatic events that happened in her life, but she's finally sober and now trying to go into the world of looking for a job. However, not too many people go and trust her to go and work for them. So with the help of her sponsor, he is able to go and find her a position where she can go and nanny for a couple that is new to an area. The couple goes and meets Mallory, and the husband is a little bit skeptical, whereas the wife is like, nope, our son loves you, come on in. So Mallory is going and watching their son But while doing so, she starts to notice that there's some weird events, one of which is the sun is drawing some very creepy images. And she ends up going and getting very invested in figuring out what exactly is going on. I won't give any more details aside from that because I think you should go in this book with as little as possible because it is so interesting. Like I said, I know a lot of people didn't like this book, but I thoroughly devoured it. I could not put the book down. I needed to know what happened. And although the ending was very rushed in my point of view, I still really enjoyed the book, and I'm definitely going to check out more by this author as well. Then I finally got to read The Naturals by Jennifer Lynn Barnes, and I rated this one 4.5. This one would have been 5 stars for me, however, the ending of the book was a little bit too fast as well. I finally can see why everyone was saying that this book reminded them of Criminal Minds. Criminal Minds is one of my all-time favorite shows, and while I was reading this book, I was like, I really need to go and rewatch the series. I kind of fell off of it once a lot of my favorite characters left, but now I feel like I need to start it over again and watch through up until the new seasons. So with this one, 17-year-old Cassie Hobbs is a natural at reading people. She kind of has this gift where she is very much like the ideal profiler, just naturally. She's kind of dealing with the fact that her mother disappeared. She's more than certain her mom was probably murdered, and she's trying to go about her life as normal. However, she constantly feels like she has to mask around other people because of her gift that she has. But then suddenly she gets recruited by the FBI, and she's surrounded by a group of kids that also have various gifts that help the FBI figure out a lot of unsolved cold cases. So this book was so interesting. I definitely want to continue on with this series because I loved this book so much. Like I said, I would have rated it 5 stars. However, the ending of it was just way too quick for my personal liking. And so it couldn't be a 5-star for me, but it was fairly close. I actually had to run into my partner's office quite a few times just saying how much I love this book and needed to pick up the second book as soon as possible. So this was definitely one of my favorite reads for the month and before I got into my reading slump. Those are the 8 books that I read in the month of April. I'd love to hear your thoughts down below if you agree with me on some of the books that I read. Did you like them more than I did, or were some of the books that I absolutely loved ones that you did not like at all? I definitely love to hear your thoughts. Maybe also go and leave a like, possibly subscribe. It definitely means the world to me, and I truly enjoy getting to go and chat about books with you all. It's one of my favorite things to do. I forgot how much I loved reading, and ever since I got back into it, it's been my favorite thing in the world to do, if you can't tell by a lot of the books that I have on my bookshelves. But as always, I want to say I love you all so, so much. And if you enjoyed the video, if you made it this far, maybe go and leave a stack of books down in the comments below. And I just want to remind you all that you are all worthy and capable of amazing things. Bye.